Wow. We've came to Psalm 78. Psalm 78 has 72 verses in it. It covers the Bible from day one to the last day. It has so much in it, it would take a good solid week to cover it, really cover it good. I have my Dake Bible open. It's a King James Version put out by a man by the Dake, D-A-K-E, and he has got more references in this Bible than any other Bible I have with references in it. I'm going to read the references on the side note for the first 15 verses. And then I'm going to read the psalm. What I might do right here is I'll read the verses, then I'll read you the side notes. Give ear, O my people, to my law. Incline your ears, period, 2 ears, your ears to the word of my mouth. The prophecy of the Messiah now in verse 2. I will open my mouth in a parable. I will utter dark sayings of old. Now we're going to look at the Mosaic propagation for the Israelites, which we have heard and know, and our fathers have told us. We will not hide them from their children, showing to the generations to come the phrases of the Lord, His strength, His wonderful works that He hath done. For He established a testimony in Jacob, and appointed a law in Israel, which became mandated from our fathers, that they should make them known to the children. Verse 6, we start with a sevenfold purpose of the Mosaic law, that the generations to come might know them, even the children which should be born, who should arise and declare them to their children, that they might set their hope in God and not forget the works of God, but keep His commandments, and might not be as their fathers, a stubborn and rebellious generation, a generation that set not their hearts aright, and whose spirit was not satisfied with God. This is kind of where we are today in our United States of America. We are at this doorstep of no God for me. I got it. I can handle it. I can make it. Well, I can tell you what. You go sit in any courtroom, in any city, in any state in the United States right now, and review what's happening in the courtrooms, and you will understand that people can't make it. They're not making it. The jailhouses are full. Misdemeanor cases are getting time. Why? Well, you can pay $30 or take 30 days. Many people today don't have $30. They say, I'll have to take 30 days. There's no way I could get $30 out. They had robbed themselves and their neighbors and their mother and their father and everybody else so they could do dope. And yet they can't pay a fine of $30 so they can get out of spending 30 days in jail. So they go to jail for 30 days. Our jailhouses are full of people with misdemeanors. Yes, they are full of people that have done bad, but the misdemeanor crowd is in there too. What does the misdemeanor crowd do while they're in there? They go to school. What is the schooling they're going to? They're learning from others how to do these things without being caught, and not thinking about the fact is the guy that's teaching it did get caught. So that's the case. That the generation to come might know them, even the children which should be born, who should arise and declare them to their children, that they might set their hope in God, and not forget the works of God, but keep his commandments, and might not be as their fathers, a stubborn and rebellious generation, a generation that set not their heart aright, whose spirit was not satisfied with God. How many Christian families, as I was a Christian family, and I had one boy who tried the ways of the world and found himself in the jailhouse. And it just has been a tough life for him. And he still is not the way he wants to follow God. Claims salvation, but never had any evidence of it. Without evidence of it, you can't prove it. If you say you're saved and you have no evidence of that, you are deceiving yourself. A saved person acts like they're saved. They go to church. They study the Bible. If you have no interest in this book, more than likely you have no interest in God. Oh, you say, well, I go to church and I hear the preacher. Yeah? Do you follow what he says? My biggest pet peeve today, personally, is that I believe it's nearly impossible to follow God and have a television in your house. I had to turn my television off. I had to disconnect it and turn it off. I still have the TV screen up there. I play VCRs on it. I play tapes on it. I play Christian things on it through a VCR. But I don't have outside world connection to what is on television today. Why? I cannot trust myself. I am weak in that area. I actually like westerns. I actually like war movies. And time that I should be spending in this book, I spend in front of the television only to regret that I didn't stay in the book, that I got out of the book and got into that. And I'd be bad to do that. And so I have to stay under myself and say, hey, that's not profitable. I need to do what is profitable. What is profitable? Studying God's Word. I am careful to not get overrun with study or get fatigued in it. Because you can do that. You can get fatigued in study. And so you have to be careful you don't do that. And so here we are again in verse 9. The children of Ephraim, being armed and carried bows, turned back in the day of battle. They kept not the covenant of God, and refused to walk in his law, and forgot his works and his wonders that he had showed them. Verse 12, marvelous things did he in the sight of their fathers in the land of Egypt, in the field of Zoan. He divided the sea, caused them to pass through, and he made the waters to stand in a heap. The waters that stood in a heap. In the daytime also, he led them with a cloud, and all the night with a light of fire. He clave the rock in the wilderness and gave them drink as out of a great depths. He brought streams also out of the rock and caused water to run down like a river. Did you know that in the middle of the desert, as the children of Israel, 2 to 3 million people were going in the desert, that there was a rock that followed them? Then that rock was Jesus Christ. And God told Moses to smite that rock one time, and he got severely punished because he struck it twice. But the striking of one time was the picture of Jesus hanging on the cross for all sin one time. And that was where the mistake was made, when he smote the rock twice. Because it was a picture. Jesus is the water of life. Whatever he said and did was for you and I. If we do it, we have the water of life, eternal life in us. And he would give us that. Let's go on. He brought streams out of the rock and caused waters to run down like a river. And they sinned yet more against him by provoking the Most High in the wilderness. And they tempted God in their heart by asking meat for their lust. They spake against God. They said, can God furnish a table in the wilderness? Behold, he smote the rock, and the water gushed out, and the streams overflowed. Can he give bread also? Can he provide flesh for his people? Therefore the Lord heard this, and was wroth. So a fire was kindled against Jacob. The anger also came up against Israel, because they believed not in God, and trusted not in his salvation. Though he had commanded the clouds from above to open the doors of heaven, and had rained down manna unto them to eat, and had given them of the corn of heaven. Man did eat angel food. He sent them meat to be full. He caused an east wind to blow in the heaven, and the east wind to blow in the heaven, and by his power he brought in the south wind. He raised flesh also among them as dust, and feathered fowls like as the sand of the sea. He gave them quails. He let it fall in the midst of their camp, round about their habitation. So they did eat, and were well filled. For he gave them their own desire. They were not estranged from their lust. But while their meat was yet in their mouth, the wrath of God came upon them, and slew the fattest of them, and smote down the chosen men of Israel. For all this they sinned still, and believed not for his wondrous work. Therefore their days did he consume in vanity, and their years in trouble. When he slew them, then they sought him, and they returned and inquired early after God. And they remembered that God was their rock, and the high God of their Redeemer. And he was their Redeemer. Verse 37. 36, nevertheless, they did flatter him with their mouth, and they lied unto him with their tongues. For their heart was not right with him, neither were they satisfied in his covenant. But he, being full of compassion, forgave their iniquities, and destroyed them not. Yea, many a time turned he his anger away, and did not stir up all his wrath. For he remembered that they were but flesh, a wind that passeth away, and cometh not again. How oft did they provoke him in the wilderness, and grieve him in the desert? Yea, they turned back and tempted God, and limited the Holy One of Israel. They remembered not his hand, nor the day when he delivered them from the enemy. Do you know that when they crossed the Red Sea, a very few days from then, they could have been in the Promised Land? But instead, they rebelled against God. And because he did, he let them march 40 years in the wilderness. 40 years to you and I seems like a half a lifetime. Undoubtedly to God, it is a short time. But, verse 43, how he had wrought his signs in Egypt, and his wonders in the field of Zoan, and had turned their rivers into blood, and their floods that they could not drink. He sent divers sorts of flies among them, which devoured them, and frogs within destroyed them. He gave also their increases unto the caterpillar, and their labor unto the locust. He destroyed their vines with hail, and their sycamores trees with frost. He gave up their cattle also to the hail, and their flocks to the hot thunderbolts. Can you imagine being over there in that hot climate and having dead animals everywhere? Having dead frogs everywhere? Having dead flies piled up 3 feet deep? Having the water turn to blood? Can you imagine these things? No, we can't imagine. They're too wicked to imagine. How he had wrought his signs in Egypt, and his wonders in the field of Zoan, and had turned their rivers into blood, and their floods that they could not drink. He sent divers sorts of flies among them, which devoured them, the frogs which destroyed them. He gave also their increases unto the caterpillar, and their labor unto the locusts. He destroyed their vineyards with hail, and their sycamores trees with frost. He gave up their cattle also to the hail, and their flocks to the thunderbolts. He cast upon them the fierceness of his anger, wrath, and indignation, and trouble, by sending evil angels among them. He made a way to his anger. He spared not their soul from death, but gave their life over to the pestilence, and smote all the firstborn in Egypt, the chief of their strength in the tabernacle of Ham, but made his own people to go forth like sheep, guided them in the wilderness like a flock, and he led them on safety, so that they feared not. But the sea overwhelmed their enemies, and he brought them to the border of his sanctuary, even to this mountain which his right hand hath purchased. He cast out the heathen also before them, and divided them an inheritance by the line, and made the tribe of Israel to dwell in their tents. Yet they tempted and provoked the Most High God, and kept not the testimonies, but turned back and dealt unfaithfully like their fathers. They were turned aside like deceitful bows. For they provoked him to anger with their high places, and moved him to jealousy with their graven images. When God heard this, he was wroth, and greatly abhorred Israel, so that he forsook the tabernacle of Shion in the tent which he had placed among men, and delivered his strength unto the captivity, and his glory unto the enemy's hand. He gave his people over unto the sword, and was wroth with his inheritance. The fire consumed their young men, and their maidens were not given to marriage. Their priests fell by the sword, and their widows made no lamentation. Then the Lord awoke as one out of sleep, and like a mighty man that shutteth by reason of wine, and he smote his enemies in the hinder part. He put them to the perpetual reproach. Moreover, he refused the tabernacle of Joseph, and closed not the tribe of Ephraim, but chose not the tribe of Ephraim, but chose the tribe of Judah, the mountain of Zion, which he loved, and built his sanctuary like high places, like the earth which he hath established forever. He chose David also as his servant, and took him from the sheepfold, from following the ewes great with young. He brought him to feed Jacob his people, and Israel his inheritance. So he fed them according to the integrity of his heart, and girded them with the skillfulness of his hand. The end of 78. Wow. And it had 72 great verses. I have more writing on the sidelines than the psalm itself. If I was to read all the sidelines, it would be unreal. He turned his anger away often. He held his wrath many times. He remembered that they were but flesh. He remembered they were like the wind which passeth away. He delivered them from the enemies. He turned the rivers into blood. Sent many kinds of things to plague Egypt, that he might deliver his people, the Israelites, from such a place and such bondage. Do you know he's the same God today? Do you know he has delivered us in the United States of America from the bondage of communism, from the bondage of many other kinds of isms that would cause us misery and reproach? He has blessed this country because we say, in God we trust. We're fast leaving that though. We're fast getting away from in God we trust. And because of that, we're going to draw a reproach from God on this country. In my war films that I have, that I look at every once in a while, the bomb that we dropped on Hiroshima annihilated the whole place. And now other countries have that same ability. They could drop about 3 of those on the United States and wipe us off the map. All at one time. Everybody. Poof. Gone. Buildings, people, everything. Just wipe us off the map. Can be done today. What's keeping it from being done? The only thing I can see is God's watching over us and not allowing it to be done. But if we get far enough over on the left, don't think it not possible to happen. Do you know the hailstones that God rained on Egypt could be rained on this United States? Can you imagine a 1,000-pound hailstone coming out of the sky and hitting the top of the Empire State Building? How far it would go down through it before it stopped? And if there were several more like it, it would take the building to the ground. It would take all of the buildings in New York City to the ground. Old wooden houses like this thing right here, 2 or 3 of them hailstones, it'd be nothing but a pile of rubble. And then it would burn. See, those hailstones, when they come from heaven, they're traveling at such a speed, they catch on fire. You say, but they're ice, Peter. They may be ice, but they have fire in them because it's hail and fire. Because of the speed they're traveling, they catch on fire. When God flings them out, and they fall the distance, but they fall, God has a way of doing away with things, finishing it, wiping it up. But there's other things happening right now. Right now we have the locusts. Back in Bible days, you remember the locusts? Well, they're here again. I understand that they are devouring thousands of acres in Africa right now. Well, what's going to happen to them when they get hungry? And they get in the east wind and they cross the ocean and they hit the shores of other countries and they're hungry. And not only that, they're an evil beast. They don't only just eat everything, they lay a worm called a cankerworm in the ground. And that worm goes down and it eats the root. And then it turns into another worm after it eats the root and flies away again to land somewhere else to do some more of its mischief. God has a way of cleaning this earth up. I kid you not. He could wipe everything that man has put on this earth. He could wipe it off this earth in 10 minutes if he wanted to. He could blow it all away. We've seen storms that blow nearly a whole country away. We've seen that monster tidal wave that come up and devour a whole country. Just one wave out of the ocean, just sweep the country and wipe it out. I had the opportunity of going to Mississippi when that wave had come up into the land about a mile or so and went back out. I saw block frames of Walmarts that it took the roof It took every single solitary thing that was in the building with it when it went back out. And there was nothing left, just the blocks. Everything was gone. There's no evidence that everything was ever in it, except what's hanging in what trees were left. Amazing. God has a way of handling this earth when the time comes. Well, we'll see you next time. As Brother Peter saying, bye-bye. Have a good day. Right.